Well, hello and welcome to this video lecture on Chapter 5, which is about communication theory and public opinion. A lot of people think communication theory isn't fun, but you're going to learn differently because it is fun. We're going to cover quite a few things in this chapter. We're going to start with the big myth. Then I'm going to give you a communication model, followed by a history of communication theory. And I'm going to use monkey business as a way to describe how communication theory has developed over the last 100 years. We're also going to look at some theory from psychology about motivations and perceptions of why people do what they do, how people measure and what we can learn from studying public opinion, and finally a case study with our own campus art museum to bring it all together. One, the big myth is that communication is easy. It is not. The communication model, I'm going to pull you from interpersonal to mass communication, and then the evolution of mass communication theory using the monkey business. And you'll learn about direct effects theories, limited effects theories, and how the question has really changed recently in communication theory. And all of that will be in part 1. And in part 2, we will look at psychology theory, public opinion, and a case study of the Beach Art Museum. So today's lineup: the big myth, a communication model, and calm theory. The big myth is that communication is easy. A lot of people majoring in communication just say, oh, I'm a people person and it just comes to me. Well, communication is not easy. Let's take a simple phrase like he said she kicked him. 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 Okay, so I said that line, which has 5 words in it. And all I did each time I changed the emphasis of the word. He said she kicked him. He said she kicked him. That totally changes the meaning of it. Communication is not easy, and even a simple 5-word sentence carries with it all sorts of vocal inflections and facial expressions that totally change the meaning of a simple sentence. So communication is not easy. Once upon a time, I had an elderly neighbor who dialed 119 repeatedly after she had fallen and broken her hip. You think everybody knows 911. Well, no, communication is not easy. An old person who's in pain and distress, who's never done it before, and she was unable to accomplish the simple task of dialing 911 and instead kept dialing 119. Communication is not easy. Most of you may be living in Kansas, okay? You think you would know the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning, but do you? Many of you do not, and you live here and you've heard it explained to you hundreds of times, and it's geographically relevant to your safety, and communication is not easy, okay? So why isn't it easy? Let's understand that. And because it's not easy is why we need theory to give us a more conceptual, well-rounded way to understand it. So a communication model. All right, we got a sender. Well, this person can send all they want. They also need a receiver. And a lot goes on in a simple interpersonal interaction. A sender first has to encode a message, and that message is sent to a receiver. The receiver then needs to hear that message and decode it, okay? And then the receiver can become the sender because he encodes some feedback. Then the sender is going to listen, and then we're going to get back and forth with messages encoding and decoding and traveling through the sound or through a telephone or over text messages. And we've got a lot going on in a simple interpersonal conversation. Moreover, this whole business happens in context of noise, and there's all kinds of noise. There's physical noise. There's a bad smell in your car. There's somebody on your bumper. There's things going on around you. There's emotional noise of past history between the two people. There may be physical noise. I've got a headache this day, and it makes it hard for me to communicate. So even a simple interpersonal interaction has a lot going on that can create situations for miscommunication. And I like this little graphic of miscommunication. Here's one for you on text message. A mother sends a message to her child. What does IDK, LY, and TTYL mean? I don't know. Love you. Talk to you later. Okay, I'll ask your sister. So the mother didn't think she got an answer when in fact she had. Also, the context in which communication occurs. Here we have some unfortunately placed ads. The one on the top is about childhood obesity, and the one on the bottom is about McDonald's. So, our communication models so far, we've just looked at interaction between two people. Well, if we add a few more people, we've got small group communication. So if I were lecturing to a class of 12 or 15 people, I'd call that, small group communication. Then we have mass lecture classes where there's 200 people maybe sitting and listening to a single instructor. That's more like public communication. And then finally, we've got mass communication. And if you're watching this on a YouTube video, that's a form of mass communication. I'm talking, and as many people who want to can participate. But a lot happens to complicate things as we progress from interpersonal to mass communication, as we add more and more people to the mix. The opportunity for feedback decreases and gets delayed. In a small group, maybe somebody would speak up. In a large lecture class, it's unlikely to have somebody talk a lot. And if you're watching this on YouTube and I say something you don't understand, you're going to have to send me an email. Or if you see something on TV you don't like, you're going to have to send a letter. And this means our feedback opportunities are decreasing as we add more people to the mix, and also they're getting delayed. Also, the more people in the mix, the more noise. More noise, more physical and emotional noise, more contextual noise. That ability to detect and correct misunderstandings on the spot is greatly reduced as we add more and more people to the mix. So what happens as we add more and more people to the mix is that our likelihood of miscommunication is greatly increased. So there's been lots of examples of mass communication gone bad. This is a great historical event from 1938 where a radio drama did a story about an invasion from Mars. And in fact, some people actually believed that an invasion from Mars was occurring, and there was some chaos that followed that particular radio drama. So back in 1938, there was no TV, and there was very few radio opportunities, and people took it quite seriously. There's also been mass communication failures in ads. If you go to Google and just type in advertising failures, you'll find all sorts of them. Here's an article from CNBC about 10 massive advertising campaign failures. But also a good history from Apple is they had a great successful ad in 1984. And we're going to take a moment and watch this successful ad.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory thoughts. Our unification of the laws is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people. One will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
So that ad was wildly successful. A few years later, Apple decided to do a similar ad, and it was a failure. Whereas the first ad showed great defiance to the norm, the second ad actually insulted Apple users by suggesting they were part of conformity. This ad was called Lemon.
On January 23rd, Apple Computer will announce the Macintosh Office. You can look into it, or you can go on with business as usual.
So the ads were highly similar, but the second one did not work at all because it actually insulted Apple users, and Apple Office was a failure. And to this day, it remains a failure. I don't know about you, but I put Microsoft Office package on Macintoshes because it just seems to be better software for me. And Steve Jobs, in fact, left Apple for a while after the failure of Apple Office software and then returned later to great success before his demise. But there we've got an example of mass communication failure. So as we add more people, more noise, history, context, the likelihood of miscommunication greatly increases. But we're in a new paradigm now, right? We've got things besides TV. Now we've got computers and new media. Well, new media is really cool because new media is doing something old media could not do, which is allows for instantaneous feedback, even from mass audiences, personalized feedback loops, even in mass communication situations. And my depiction there of a computer is very simplistic because in the real world, we are all connected with phones, iPads, people of all ages, people from all sorts of backgrounds. I recently bought my mother, who's 72 years old, an iPad. She loves it because it's easy to use and she's out there Facebooking and doing all sorts of fun stuff. So in a modern society, we all have gadgets that keep us connected all the time, increasing the ability for us to provide feedback and to correct misunderstandings. So this new media allows for instantaneous feedback and personalized feedback even in mass communication situations. So examples of mass scale feedback. Some television shows like American Idol will let people vote. You can text in, who you want to win the American Idol contest. YouTube allows for us to thumbs up and thumbs down specific videos that we like, therefore prioritizing an example of mass scale feedback. Reddit may be something you're familiar with, and Reddit has become incredibly popular because what it does is put together everything out there on the World Wide Web and people vote it up or down. So you can see what's hot, what's cool, what's neat by following Reddit, because you couldn't possibly go out and survey hundreds of thousands of websites. Reddit allows users to vote things up or down. Then it's creating a way of prioritizing a huge amount of information out there. And who's prioritizing that information? The users of the internet. Also in Estonia, they actually had voting by cell phone, which we have the technology to accomplish these days. So we could even use new technology's ability to feedback for democratic purposes. Lots of new media products like Tosh, who is always making fun of things on the internet. But if you watch a Tosh show live, you realize that it's going on at the same time with a major amount of Twitter and Facebook occurring during the show. And I see that on lots of sports programming these days too, that like you'll have a sports commentator behind a desk at ESPN and he's simultaneously taking tweets from people out in the audience. And that was something that couldn't be accomplished before this new media allowed for that sort of feedback loop. Also, new media allows for things to become highly personalized. I go into Netflix and it says, "Hi, Joy, here's the movies you might like based on what you've watched already. And guess what? This is what other people in Manhattan, Kansas are watching today." And lots of retailers get really good at personalized feedback loops. Here's Amazon.com. It says, "Hi, Joy. We know you like Cajun music and birds," and they will specifically throw up products based on my interest or things that I have purchased in the past. So that is an incredibly personalized feedback loop from Amazon to an individual, and they're doing it with hundreds of thousands of individuals, and that is something the new media allows. Lots of places now will let you say what your preferences are about how you want to receive information. This is one from Fox News, and you can sign up for Fox News Mobile and tell them exactly what kind of stories you want to hear, when you want to hear them, in what format you want to hear them. And this is incredible. They're basically, you're programming your own TV channel because you're getting to say what your receiver preferences are. You're not just sitting in your recliner in your living room, soaking up whatever they throw out there for the masses. You're getting to select exactly what you want, when you want, and how you want it. So, an internal summary so far. Communication is not easy. Even in simple situations between two people with a simple sentence, communication is not easy. So we need theory and models to give us conceptual tools to approach communication challenges in reasonable ways. We looked at a model of communication, and it demonstrated that the complexity of simple interpersonal interaction is there, and it gets more complex as we add people. And as we add people, successful communication becomes more and more difficult. New media options, however, are very interesting because they're allowing for audience feedback, personalized messages, and receiver preferences with mass audiences in forms that were not available to us even 10 years ago. So let's move on now to the idea of communication theory. Since communication is not easy and is rather complex, understanding theory broadens your insights and allows you strategic perspectives to analyze complex situations. So why do we need theory? To help us analyze complex situations, which will make us better communicators. A good theory, from an empirical perspective, a good theory is one that explains things for us and predicts things for us. So I want to spend some time today talking about the nature of theory. Well, let's imagine theories of health. Indigenous theories of illness versus Western theories of illness. So maybe you, when you were a little kid, had ear infections, or maybe you have children who have ear infections, or siblings or little cousins, and they get ear infections and they whine and they cry, and it's just a miserable household if you've got a child with an ear infection. Well, if you're an indigenous person living in the jungles of Brazil and your child runs fever and cries and rolls around, who do you call? Well, you may call the shaman or the medicine man. And the medicine man may come over and say, your child has some evil spirits. I'm going to dance around and then I'm going to spit on the ground. And the evil spirits will come out of your child through me, and I will expectorate them right onto the ground, and your child will get better in a few days. You're laughing. Is that a good theory? Well, does it explain and predict? Well, it does explain. It explains why the child is sick, and it predicts a method by which the shaman can eradicate the sickness. That, from a perspective of the indigenous Brazilian person, is a good theory. It explains and it predicts, and it helps us solve a complex problem of a child with an ear infection. Well, here in the United States and advanced places where we've got technology, what happens if your kid gets an ear infection? You go to the doctor, and the doctor gives you this pink stuff called amoxicillin, which is full of sugar, and you give it to your child, and what happens? Well, what happens to the Brazilian child with an ear infection? Does he die? No, ear infections go away. Kid in Brazil gets better. What happens to the kid in the United States? Yeah, he gets better too. Ear infections go away, okay? But our theory is very different than the indigenous theory. Our theory says there's these itty bitty germs, and they get in your ears and up your nose, and then they go around your body and make you sick. Can you imagine how radical that theory sounded 150 years ago or 200 years ago? The idea that there's little bitty microscopic things that are alive that invade your body, that had to be the most insane thing people thought they had ever heard of when germ theory was first developing. It just sounds so radical. You accept it as a normal course of business. It's a theory for which you use to make decisions about complex situations involving your health. So here we take our little kid to the doctor, and he gets some amoxicillin, and he gets better too. Is it a good theory? Well, from an empirical perspective, does it explain why the child is sick? Yes, it does. And does it predict how to make the sickness go away? Well, yes, it does. So a good theory that explains and predicts does not mean that it's an accurate theory. The Brazilian shaman's theory explains and predicts, and our modern Western theories of medicine explain and predict. And in this case, they both work perfectly well in the situation of ear infections. Okay? Do antibiotics really work? Well, ask the CDC, and they'll tell you most of the time antibiotics don't work at all. Okay? Ask WebMD. They'll tell you, no, only about 1 in 5 kids even benefits a little bit from taking the pink amoxicillin full of sugar. So even though we're like pumping all these kids with antibiotics, the truth of it is kids going to get better by themselves in a little while. Our theory is not really accurate, because what we find out now is not only are the antibiotics not working to reduce the time of illness, but they in fact may be setting up some complications associated with antibiotic resistance germs. So a theory doesn't have to be accurate to be good, and there we are making behaviors based on our ideas of theories. So let's look at a quick timeline of germ theory and how radical it was back in the 1600s when somebody says, I've seen a microorganism. 1670. That's 350 years ago. People knew that microorganisms existed. It took another 100 years before somebody realized if we wash our hands, women won't get sick after they have babies. Seriously, 1840. That's only 170 years ago. And they didn't understand why. They just knew it was true, that if you wash your hands, then the women wouldn't get sick as often after childbirth. They didn't understand why, per se, but they just knew it was true. 20 years later, Pasteur proved that germs are in the air but not produced by the air. He proved that germs required fermentation for growth, and even introduced the concept of a virus at that time. It was the late 1800s before people really began to accept germ theory. Okay, so this is well over 100 years after a microorganism had been observed. It was in the late 1800s before people started believing germ theory. And it was 1890 before viruses were confirmed. And it wasn't until the 1940s, though, that there was a response to the idea of germs as disease agents with the wide-scale production of antibiotics being produced and becoming widely available. And that was associated with World War II, that penicillin became widely available. So why are we talking about a timeline of germ theory? Because things that are true about the development of germ theory are also true about the development of mass communication theory. Okay? Theories may be very slow to develop, even over centuries. A theory does not have to be correct or fully understood to be useful. So they knew that washing hands resulted in less illness among new mothers. Well, today we have some of those sorts of associations. For example, young ladies who've learned recently about the HPV vaccines, they don't really understand why HPV, that particular virus, is associated with cervical cancer, but they know that it is. Okay, so they don't really understand it. They just know that it is. That was how the situation was with hand washing way back when. Also, one theory can't explain everything. Germ theory is a very useful theory. However, viruses function totally different, and the response to them must be totally different. So one theory can't explain everything. Germ theory cannot explain all disease, for example. We need multiple explanations to understand complex phenomena. And also, theory development must be ongoing. So currently, medical people are still developing theories about health and wellness, and it remains true for mass communication theory as well, because mass communication theory is an absolute infant, because at least germ theory has a couple hundred years behind it. Mass communication theory didn't really begin in earnest until World War II. And at that time, the U.S. government started really investing a lot of money in understanding persuasion and mass audience compliance and how to get people to join the World War II when it had only been 20 years earlier. They had World War I, which was billed as the war to end all wars. And there we were in that situation again. And the U.S. government had big questions about how to rally the American populace, how to really recruit and maintain good soldiers. Even though they had a draft, they had to win hearts and minds as well. And it wasn't really until the 1940s that a lot of money and scholars really started working on mass communication theory. Now, it was in the 1920s when people really started studying psychology and the nature of human minds. And it was following psychology as the first social science of any respect, as opposed to humanities, that communication scholarship even started developing. So when we look at mass comm theory, know that it is a total infant, a baby in the woods, and we have so much more to learn and know. Let's look at how mass communication theory has developed over time. So I got this silly monkey business to sort of explain it. And I'm going to go through it like this. Monkey see, monkey do. Monkey see, monkey might do. Green monkeys do one thing and blue monkeys do another. Monkeys talk to each other. Media has limited effects on monkeys. Monkeys use media. And finally, monkeys are a society. So this is how we're going to use monkeys as a way to understand how mass communication theory has really developed. So, way back in the 1940s, when they first started studying mass communication, they thought mass communication was powerful. You could just put an idea out there and everybody would adopt it. And that's what I'm referring to when I say monkey see, monkey do. And there was two big theories. One, well, they're kind of the same theory. Magic bullet, the idea that I shoot you with a bullet of communication and I change you as if I shot you with a gun. Or hypodermic needle, the idea that I could give you a message and it's like inserting something directly into your brain. Well, you know, the evidence just didn't bear out on that, but people still sometimes believe it. So here is Aretha Franklin looking all hot and sassy at the inauguration of Obama in '09. Pardon me. And she had this great hat. And Time magazine reported that the Detroit hat maker who made that hat sold out of that style and says it's going to be a month before he gets more stuff to make more of them. Well, is this an example of monkey see, monkey do, the magic bullet, hypodermic needle, the idea that people saw that hat and they wanted it immediately? Maybe and maybe not. How many people saw the inauguration? Probably 300 million people watched the inauguration. How many out of 300 million really wanted that hat and chased down the producer? I'm sure it was actually less than 50 people because a Detroit hat maker's not going to have that many expensive hats sitting around his shop. But Time magazine reported it as if you see something on the media and you immediately run out and do it. And that really doesn't pan out with the empirical evidence because often ideas are put out there and people don't do it. So since those theories weren't being very good at explaining how media work, they developed a new theory called monkey see, monkey might do. And these theories fell in a category of individual differences. So, one woman may see Aretha's hat and think she just has to have it. And another woman may see the hat and think, oh, that's atrocious. I'd never wear such a thing. So monkey see, monkey might do. Individual differences. Well, a good theory explains and predicts. This theory's got a problem in that it doesn't explain anything. And it doesn't explain who might like it and who might not like it. So this theory is, we need better theory than this. So next on our agenda is green monkeys do one thing and blue monkeys do another. And we've studied demographics and psychographics in here and thought they were pretty sophisticated, but in the grand scheme of comm theory, they are relatively old ideas, demographics and psychographics. So, green monkeys, well, women wear hats. A man wouldn't likely wear that hat. Also, fashionable women wear hats. Also, we would expect older women to wear hats. So it's not everybody was interested in Aretha Franklin's hat, but maybe just older women who are fashion conscious cared about that hat. And even among those, only those who could afford it and those that have the resources to go chasing down a specific hat to be like a celebrity would do so. But demographics and psychographics may give us a better concept into understanding our audiences and why mass communication messages may work for some people and be irrelevant for lots of other people. Now, believe it or not, it took forever for communication theorists to say, oh my gosh, people talk to each other. And it was in a study about voting behaviors that somebody actually advanced the two-step flow theory, which says media throws ideas out there, but as individuals, we don't immediately interpret what the media say. We talk to people who are our opinion leaders. And all of us, I think, do that. So, I don't go to a movie based on seeing an ad for the movie. I go to the movie because I ask a movie friend, which one should I go see? I used to have a clothes friend too, and I miss her horribly because I wouldn't shop, by myself. I'd just go with her and she'd say, buy that, buy that. And I just took her advice because it was easy. And when you vote or when you buy a car, you're likely to be talking to your parents or your spouses or other people who are important to you. When it comes to big important decisions, it's not the case that we just look at media and immediately respond. So the two-step flow theories are the idea that media may throw ideas out there, but we're really taking cues from our opinion leaders. And our opinion leaders might be parents, children, they might be bosses. Sometimes celebrities are, in fact, opinion leaders, because Oprah can certainly tell me what book to buy and read. So we've got all sorts of different opinion leaders in our lives for different decisions we make. So monkey see, monkey do, monkey see, monkey might do, green monkeys do one thing, and monkeys talk to each other. So finally, people realized, media is just not that powerful. Media has limited effects. But those first four sets, or the earliest theorizing going on in media, can generally be categorized as media effects theories. They're all saying that media is important. Then we move into limited effects, where they say, media is not that important. And they started developing theories like agenda setting. And agenda setting, what that theory says, is the media doesn't tell you what to think, but it does tell you what to think about. Okay? So right now, the Summer Olympics of 2012 are going on, and I've been thinking about the Olympics. And I'm not necessarily, saying this sport's cool or that sport's cool or I want this country to win, but I'm thinking about the Olympics in general. Same thing happens when campaign season rolls around. Okay, the media is not necessarily effective at telling you how to vote, but they're getting you to think about voting in general and what the issues are of the day. So agenda setting says that media doesn't tell you what to think, it doesn't dictate your opinion, but it does tell you what to think about. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence that this theory does, in fact, explain a lot of what goes on, especially when we measure public opinion, which we'll do in part 2 of chapter 5 video. Finally, people just changed the question. They just changed the question and they said, they didn't say, what does media do to people? They totally changed the question and they said, how do people use media? And they developed the uses and gratifications theories. And uses and gratifications theory says, why do people seek out certain media? And what do they get out of it? So, for example, my favorite movie of all time is The Color Purple. And every time Mr. takes Celia's sister away, I cry. Oh, that's just stupid. Why would I watch a movie that makes me cry repeatedly? Well, apparently I'm getting some sort of psychological release or satisfaction out of it because I've done it several times. And guys, quit laughing at me. Lots of guys have the bang 'em, blow 'em up movies. Oh, you love it. You've watched it a million times. You love it. It makes you feel aggressive and it feels good. So we're using media and we do it a lot. If we want to relax, we might put on, some new age music. If we want to get excited, we're going to put on some pump up music. We use media to meet our emotional needs, our informational needs, and we seek it out and use it in certain ways. Now, a lot of people want to say, for example, that video games make children violent. Well, that's a monkey see, monkey do theory, isn't it? video games, violent video games would make children go out and behave violently. Well, uses and gratifications would say, do people with violent needs seek out violent video games? Totally different question. So it was a really big shift in question when the uses and gratification theories came on. And then finally is a set of theories which says monkeys are a society. And here's where you get into theories about how we ought to treat each other, where does power come from, how should power be distributed. So we're getting into some Marxist theory and feminist theory and ethnic theory and different ways of approaching the whole idea of mass communication as part of a societal building system. So there you have it, the evolution of mass comm theory. First, mass comm theory is a baby. It really didn't start until the early 1900s. And originally, people thought that the media was very powerful. But the empirical evidence showed that the media wasn't that powerful, that we talk to each other, that media, in fact, has limited effects. And people even changed the question into what does media do to people? They changed the question to how do people use media? And finally, people as a society. So, a little internal summary so far what we've done in this video lecture. Mass comm theory is an infant. The questions that we're asking as communication theorists are changing. No one theory provides a comprehensive understanding of the complex phenomena of communication. It is likely that our current theories are flawed, but they can work for us in the meantime to a degree as we develop new theories. And monkey business helps us understand the evolution of mass comm theory and how that thought has gone over time. Okay, next time, part 2. We're going to look at some psychology theory, motivations and perceptions, what makes people tick, okay, what makes messages persuasive or not. We're going to learn about public opinion, how it's measured, what it means, and we're going to look at a case study with our own campus art museum. Well, that's it, guys. I'll see you back next time for Chapter 5, Part 2.